Good. Okay. All right. I'll like to welcome everybody tonight to our public information session. Tonight we have a public information session on our water and wastewater rate study. The purpose of the study is to review our capital plan and operating budgets into the future and set rates for the water and wastewater utilities going forward so that we can adequately fund our operating and capital costs into the future. The town has retained BMA Management Consulting to complete the utility rate study, and they've completed our last 2 or 3 rate studies. And we have Jim Braziz from BMA Management Consulting here tonight, and he's going to go over a presentation which outlines the process that BMA has followed to draft our water and wastewater utility rates. And I'd like to welcome Jim to the podium. Thank you. Thank you, Brian.
I guess. Slide 3. Okay. The excuse me, province of Ontario passed the Safe Drinking Water Act after the Walkerton inquiry, and one of the regulations under the act are that municipalities are required to develop a 6-year financial plan to demonstrate that it is financially sustainable. The town has taken a little bit more proactive and integrated approach. The town, in fact, has prepared a 10-year financial plan. And the plan goes from 2025 to 2034. And they've also included, we've also included a wastewater financial plan to bring all of the utilities together. Wastewater is not regulated. It's not a requirement. But as I say, the town's taken an integrated approach. The goal of the whole financial plan is to ensure that water and wastewater systems are financially sustainable. So one of the things just up front, the long-range financial plan, it's dynamic. It doesn't represent a formal multi-year budget for the town. There's an approval process, and council approves the budget on an annual basis. So we've taken great effort to present accurate financial projections based on all of the data that's available to us at this point in time. So to do a long-range financial plan, of course, you have to come up with assumptions. And over the course of the next 5-6 years, some of those assumptions that we made may have changed. There could be different council priorities. Planning policies could have an effect. Changes to service levels would have an effect on the operating costs. Consumption projections, that would affect the rate calculation, and infrastructure requirements could change as well. So a lot of these changes, like I say, it's dynamic. And so as based on the assumptions that we made, if they changed over the course of the next 5 or 6 years, they should be reflected in a revised financial plan. So the guiding principles we use to prepare the financial plan were, first of all, stable and predictable rate increases. We wanted to make sure that ratepayers had a source of information that they can rely on to prepare their own personal budgets. A fair sharing in the distribution of resources between current and future ratepayers. And what I mean by that is not postponing capital replacements, for example, to future generations. So the current generation that uses the part of the financial asset should pay for that. We want to make sure that obviously there's sustainable cash flows. The plan adheres to the city's reserve and debt policies. And we want to maintain programs and services excuse me, that meet or exceed environmental protection standards, and then maintain affordable water and wastewater rates. So one of the things that we've undertaken in preparation of the financial plan, we looked at some pure benchmarking, water and wastewater costs, And what you would have on the screen here is water and wastewater costs for a typical residential property that uses 180 cubic meters a year. And you can see the costs of the various municipalities charge based on, again, 180 cubic meters. The average of those municipalities is $1,369. The cost in Penetanguishene is $1,234. This is about a 10% lower than the pure municipalities that you have on the screen here. One of the things that our firm also does is we look at rates of, we've got in our database 120 different municipalities across Ontario, and that represents over 85% of the population of Ontario. And in that database, you can see on the chart there, it says average 120 plus Ontario municipalities. The average cost across Ontario is 1,311. So again, you're lower than the average of the Ontario average. The next slide deals with affordability. And as I say, your costs are lower than the average for the peer municipalities and the Ontario municipalities. However, when you look at costs as a percentage of average household income, the average household income in Penetanguishene is about just over 95,000. The average in the peer municipalities is 115,000. So you can see you're quite a bit lower actually than the average of the peer municipalities. So when you do the calculation of water and wastewater costs as a percentage of the average household income, the average is 1.2% across the peer municipalities. And in the case of Penetanguishene, it's about 1.3%. The leading practice suggests that water and wastewater costs as a percentage of average household income should be in the range of 1 to 3%. And you're certainly well within that range. You're at the lower end of the range. Next slide. Some of the challenges that you're facing when we look at the long-range financial plan. First of all, it's a very costly system. The asset management plan that was created in 2004, they showed a replacement value of $78.7 million in water and $158.4 million in wastewater. So there's a lot of, it's very capital intensive, and all of that capital eventually has to be replaced. So it's a very costly system in that regard. When we look at the availability of capital reserves, when you have the 10-year capital budget for water was $13.3 million that would come from rates. The current reserve balance is only $0.2 million. So you can see there's a substantial gap between the two numbers that has to be made up over the future years. In the case of wastewater, there's $6.8 million in the capital budget, and there's actually a deficit in the reserves in wastewater of $1 million. So you can see the magnitude of the problem that we're facing. The other challenge is there's increasing capital and operating costs. A lot of the costs to deal with the operations of water and wastewater are increasing faster than the rate of inflation. There's a reliance on debt financing because of the situation I just showed. The amount of the capital budget and the reserves, we're not able to come up with all of that money over the next 6 years or 10 years rather. So there is built into the forecast is a debenture issue in 2033 of $9.6 million. I think that relates to the Robert Street well. And again, that's in 2033. So the debt financing costs are also causing a little bit of a challenge. The next thing I want to show, again, part of the challenges is there's an annual infrastructure gap. In other words, the asset management plan identified how much should be contributed on an annual basis for the timely replacement of the water and wastewater assets. And according to the latest asset management plan, you can see the numbers on there, the recommended annual average in the middle of the chart. In the case of water, there should be a contribution from the operating budget to the capital reserves for the replacement of the assets of 1.858 million per year. The current contribution is about 316,000. So you can see there's, in the case of water, what you should be contributing, the difference between what you should be contributing and what's actually being contributed, there's a gap of $1.5 million that has to be made up. And in the case of wastewater, same type of situation, you can see the amount from the operating budget that being contributed. The recommended annual average from the asset management plan is 3.1 million, 3.165 million. So there's a deficit in the wastewater operation of almost 2.5 million that has to be made up. And leading practice in this regard is to, again, you don't want to defer these costs to future generations when, you know, it's going to be, they're going to have their own problems. So leading practice is to make annual contributions to the capital program based on the average replacement cost requirements. Recognizing, so you can see the magnitude of the problem. So, but we do recognize ratepayer affordability. So there's no, the amount that is required, that infrastructure gap, to meet that in 1 year is unaffordable. You just can't do it. So recognizing that, what we've built into the financial forecast is a gradual increase to come up with those numbers that were identified in the asset management. And if we go to the next slide, this is the actual plan and the contribution to reserves. So what we did in the water and wastewater operations is we gradually built up the capital reserve contribution over a 15-year period. And so what we have is at the end of 15 years, if you increase rates according to our financial projections, that'll meet the annual requirements over the 15-year period. And in the wastewater, it's the same thing. We come up with, again, recognizing ratepayer affordability, we come up with meeting the average contribution over a 15-year period. So by 2040, there should be sufficient contributions. So just to look at reserve strategies and policies. So the purpose of maintaining reserves is to provide for rate stabilization. There's a lot of, could be unforeseen for circumstances that would create deficits. So you want to make sure that you have reserves to cover that off. To make provisions for this is one of the key items in the reserve strategy is to make provisions for replacement, renewals, and acquisitions of capital assets to ensure adequate sustainable cash flows and then to ensure financial sustainability. So recognizing the policies and the leading practices with regard to reserves, the leading practice is to have a minimum balance in the reserve of 3% of the asset replacement values. And you can see from my previous chart, the amounts that you currently have in reserves are substantially below that 3% level. The reason for that is to cover emergency situations, shortfalls, consumption decreases that weren't projected. So the target balance based on the financial plan is to meet in 2031 to meet that 3% level for water and in 2033 in wastewater. So you can see the blue line, which is the water and how it's increasing, that the reserve balance is increasing and it'll meet that 3% again by 2031. And then wastewater, you can see it a little bit longer. And again, you remember that the wastewater reserve is currently in a deficit of $1 million. So like I said, there was a requirement in the water operations to issue debt of $9.6 million in 2033. And so the prudent use of debt is a fundamental component to a well-developed and credible financial plan. Leading practice is to have maximum debt charges from your operating budget of 10 to 15% of own source revenues. And on a combined basis, you can see the charts here. Right now, the wastewater debt charges are a little bit higher than the 15%. in 2025. And in the case of the water, they're substantially lower. They're almost about 1%. So when you look at that, that on a combined basis, that orange line there, you're currently at about 12% of own source revenues on a combined basis. And then over the course of the financial plan, that gradually decreases. And then in 2033, that's when we had to issue that $9.6 million in debentures to meet the capital budget requirements. You can see the orange line is still within that 10 to 15% range. So the next slide, this is the ratepayer, the results of the financial plan, the ratepayer impact. So you can see in 2024, as I said up front, based on 180 cubic meters for a residential customer, they're currently paying 1,234. And then in 2025, in accordance with the plan, that would increase to 1,340, which represents a blended water and wastewater increase of 8.6%. And what that means to a ratepayer is an increase of $106 a year, about $8 or $9 a month. And then you can see the increases over the course of the plan. In 2026, it increases another $116. And then by 2030, you start seeing the increases are less, the percentage increases are less. And that's because that wastewater that had a more significant problem, we were able to reduce that at that period of time. So the increases over the course of the 10 years is just over $100 a year. So just to summarize, as I say, to meet those guidelines, we built in stable and predictable rate revenue increases to help residents do their own budgets, provides a sustainable level of revenue to provide for future rehabilitation and replacement needs that have been identified. There's a gradual increase built in the capital reserve contributions, and we had to do it gradually to maintain ratepayer affordability. It maximizes financial flexibility because we built the reserves and we have prudent use of the debt, and maintains programs and services that meet environmental protection standards and adheres to the town's financial policies with regard to debt and reserves. And that's the end of the presentation. Be happy to answer any questions anyone has. Yes.
So that people online can hear you. How do you suggest just use one of the microphones here? Yeah. One of the maybe this one here, no, or maybe one of the counselor microphones. Okay, yeah, that works.
Back on slide 13. I was a little confused on that. The rate of increase for 2025 is $116. That's over what they're currently paying?
Yeah, actually,
$106 more than they pay now. And then on the next year, is it 116 plus the 106?
That's correct. You can see the number, the actual totals. In 2024, it's 1 million or 1,234, and by the time you get to 2026, it's 1,457.
Okay, thank you.
Online, that Question? Question for Jim? Ask you to go to the microphone there.
Okay, so 106 per year in 2025, that's added on to what we're paying now. And then in 2026, it'll be another 116 added to, yeah.
That's correct.
Oh. Yeah. Yeah.
So in 2024,
Mm-hmm.
based on
Yeah. Yeah.
the next year, 1,340, and increases 1,456.
Yeah.
And again, the main reason for the increases is to come up with the required capital contributions to reserves. Like I showed in one of the slides, there's a substantial deficit of what's currently being contributed, and that's not sustainable.
Okay. Okay, so what you're presenting is what you want the town to do, basically, in layman's terms.
Yeah. Like I said, second slide, it is a dynamic plan because to project in the future, obviously you have to make assumptions. And so there's a chance that some of these assumptions could change over the course of the 6 years. So council would still recommend the annual budget. So this doesn't tie council into this a 6-year increase.
If there's no further questions, I'd like to thank Jim Braziz from BMA Management Consulting for presenting tonight and braving the roads out there and coming all the way from Hamilton. So it's very much appreciated, Jim, and it's a great presentation. I appreciate the questions that were received tonight. So we'll take those back, and the plan going forward is to present the proposed water and wastewater rates at the next meeting of the Committee of the Whole in February, and pending the passage of those rates at the Committee of Whole, they would be adopted by Council in the next month in March. So those are the next steps in terms of the process moving forward in terms of adopting our new water and wastewater rates. And again, if there's any of you here that have further questions for myself before we present those to council, or anybody online that wishes to submit questions or comments, they're able to do so, and we'll incorporate those in the report to council that's being presented in February. Oh, sure.
Yes, Tim here. I just have one quick question, Brian. So that's looking at approximately a 70%, a little more than 70% increase over the 10 years. Does that budget increase allow for exigent circumstances that may happen, of major breakdowns or anything like that? Or is that in addition to the proposed budget increases?
Yeah, I think I'll try to field that, Jim, and maybe you can step in if I'm missing something. But as Jim had indicated, the proposed rates include the operating or forecasted operating and capital budgets that we've prepared for council. Again, as Jim had said, that it's a dynamic plan and subject to change as we look at budgets on an annual basis. But there is a certain level of uncertainty there in terms of those rates. And the one thing I would add in terms of this rate study that's maybe different from other rate studies is that we're actually incorporating the reserve balance and increasing those reserve balance to accommodate any unforeseen breakdowns, as you mentioned, or any unforeseen expenses that may come up. Again, we're usually in the process of updating our water and wastewater rate studies about 3 or 4 years at a time. So in about 3 or 4 years' time, we'll actually look at our capital forecast and see if there's another update to our rates that's needed to obviously match our financial responsibilities going forward. But to answer your question, there is a certain level of unknowns that we've factored into these rates to account for any unforeseen circumstances. But we do update them approximately every 3 or 4 years.
All right, thank you.
Anything else, Brittany? So I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight. I know the weather outside it is what it is, but I do appreciate everybody coming tonight and providing your feedback and attending tonight's meeting. We will be providing a recording of tonight's meeting and the presentation for those that weren't able to make it tonight. And we're making that available on our website. So if anybody wants to take a look and review the proposed water and wastewater rates in the presentation tonight, they're welcome to do so, and that should be available on our website here shortly after this meeting. Thanks everybody for coming tonight. Have a good night.